"They insulted me, and so I killed them," uttered the infamous serial murderer Fritz Honka. He would lurk, carefully take in his surroundings and his fellow comrades in drinking. Each gulp of schnapps gave him a little more courage, and then, in the early morning hours, certain women, whether through the effects of alcohol or desperation for more drink, or both, would take up his offer of a nightcap. This would sometimes lead to fatal consequences for the ones who rejected his advances or derided him. His name, Fritz Honka. His job, night watchman. Between 1970 and 1974, Fritz Honka committed numerous femicides. After his night shift had ended, he went to seedy bars like Zum Goldenen Handschuh and Elbschlosskeller. There he would consume vast amounts of alcohol. There were other night owls who shared the same desire for drink and for some company to shake off their loneliness. In the Golden Glove, now also known as the Honka Lounge, Fritz the security guard often leaves the bar at closing time, with a drunken woman in tow. He's a regular here. "Take that woman over there a drink. I'm paying," he whispers to the landlord, if a female patron takes his interest. Once friendly contact has been established, the conversation flows easier with the aid of copious amounts of rum cola. Some of these late-night imbibers were women down on their luck. Some just wanted to drink and forget. Others would be quite willing to accompany an unattractive man like Fritz home, as long as he could pay, or even keep the drinks flowing and give them a roof over their head for the night. For a psychopath like Fritz Honka, who dreamed of true love, when this purely subjective vision of a perfect soulmate is shattered, through the ugliness of having to pay for it, or being laughed at because of his appearance or his drunken impotence, it made him angry, very angry. He committed his first murder in 1970. Gertrude Breuer was a hairdresser and occasional prostitute. After killing her in his apartment, he scattered her body parts in the vicinity, and then he kept her trunk in his kitchen. 3 years later, the killing became increasingly manic. In August 1974, he strangled the 54-year-old prostitute Anna Beuschel. In December 1974, he killed 57-year-old Frieda Roblick in the same way. And then in January 1975, 52-year-old Ruth Schult. Honka looked for lonely older women. To supplement their meagre income, they would sometimes resort to sex work. These women were no longer young or desirable. For the price of a drink, a man can have their company in the bar. For a higher man, which was a 5-mark coin, sex is included. Most of these women don't have a permanent place of residence. They are alcoholics and are often estranged from their families. And when they disappear, hardly anyone misses them. He kept all the body parts in the attic connected to his apartment. When his fellow tenants complained about the smell, he always pointed to the apartment of a Greek family in the building, who, he said, cooked with exotic spices. It was pure coincidence that he was caught at all. 3:37 a.m. Alarm call in the Ottensen fire station. There is a fire at Zeitstrasse 74. The firefighters are on site in just a few minutes. On the second floor, a Norwegian sailor whose electricity was turned off fell asleep by candlelight. This caused a fire to break out in his apartment. The flames licked their way through the ceiling. As firemen were sifting through the fire-damaged apartments, they discovered the wrapped and foul-smelling body parts. It didn't take long for the police to find out who was renting that 2-room attic apartment.
In diesem Wohnhaus im Hamburger Stadtteil Altona wurden heute durch Zufall 4 Leichen gefunden. Feuerwehrleute, die einen Zimmerbrand löschten, entdeckten 2 verstümmelte Frauenleichen in Plastiksäcken. Sie waren in einer Rumpelkammer und auf dem Dachboden versteckt worden. Bei den Aufräumungsarbeiten stieß die Mordkommission auf eine weitere weibliche Leiche. Die 4., das Geschlecht ist noch unbekannt, lag hinter der Küche. Die Polizei vermutet wegen der Zerstückelung dieser Leichen Sexualverbrechen. Der Tatverdächtigt ist der 40-jährige Fritz Honka.
The firemen also discovered another body wedged in a crawl space in Honka's apartment and informed the police. The detectives pried open floorboards and tore down walls. In the end, they find the decomposed and mummified body parts of a total of 4 women in the attic. While the police are examining the crime scene, Fritz Honka climbs the narrow stairs to his home. He had just finished his shift as a night watchman. They find out that he is the only tenant with a key for the attic. After all the bodies have been found, examiners start to look around at what other items the murderer has collected. Instead of floral wallpaper, creative Fritz had papered the walls with pages from porn magazines. There are beer and liquor bottles strewn everywhere, and even more curious, they also find lots of children's dolls. The investigators make him accompany them to Berlin Tor police headquarters. In room 707 they interrogate the 39-year-old for hours. Finally, Honka breaks down and tells an interrogator that he believed he killed 3 women in his apartment, but he can't remember the details. Honka refuses to admit anything about a 4th victim. However, he admits that he placed all the bodies where they were discovered.
Ein paar Tränen will ich weinen dich, aber du wirst es nicht sehen. Denn beim Abschied will ich lächeln, als wär weiter nichts geschehen.
The case causes a sensation in Hamburg. The press relish in revealing all the details. 4 women chopped up by night watchmen, scream the headlines of the Bild newspaper. And the mass murderer lived between dolls and porn. In addition, Bild prints photos from the torture chamber of the reclusive murderer. On the day Fritz was arrested, his ex-wife told the newspaper, "I believe he could have done it." The Hamburger Abendblatt reports that he perpetrated cruel orgies. The Morgenpost proudly displays the board on which Honka sawed up the dead women. Honka's first victim was 42-year-old Gertraud Breuer. She had accompanied another woman to Honka's flat, as he had been letting her stay for a few weeks. At the beginning of December 1970, they all got drunk together on Zeissstrasse. Frau Breuer refuses to participate in a suggested threesome. At some point, Honka's girlfriend falls asleep drunk. Now he turns his attention to Breuer and tries to force himself on her. When she tries to resist, he rapes her and strangles her with a curtain. On November 2nd, 1971, Breuer's severed head and other body parts were found on wasteland near his house. Honka hides the torso in his apartment.
Ein paar Tränen will ich weinen dich, aber du wirst es nicht sehen. Denn beim Abschied will ich lächeln,
Honka dissects his victims with a saw and hides the torsos in the ceiling space of the house. After Breuer's murder, it takes 4 years before he kills again. He tries to cover up the smell of putrefaction with toilet freshener cakes. He also lays down dozens of spruce fragrant air fresheners. The neighbors complain repeatedly to the caretaker and even call the police. No investigation is undertaken, however, and the unpleasant smell is blamed on the foreign residents. Fritz convinces his nauseous fellow tenants that they are always cooking with so many exotic spices. Combed hair, neatly trimmed beard, and unassuming. That's how people in the neighborhood knew Fritz Honka. He was born in Leipzig in 1935. His father was a carpenter and his mother a cleaner. Honka's father suffered PTSD from his confinement in a concentration camp. He was also an alcoholic and often took his frustration out on his children. When he was 5, his father almost beat him to death, Honka recalled. His mother was overwhelmed with the 9 children. Fritz was sent away to grow up in children's homes. He breaks off an apprenticeship as a stonemason for health reasons. An attempt at suicide fails. At 16 he ran away to West Germany. He worked on farms and was often beaten there. At some stage, Honka is seriously injured in an accident. A car hits him. His face suffers a deformity as a result. He becomes cross-eyed and can no longer do hard menial work. In 1956, there seemed to be a turning point in his life. Honka moved to Hamburg and found work at the ports. He marries and the couple have a son, but the marriage is not happy. Honka is to be found sitting in local bars more and more often. His wife ends up divorcing him, not only because of his heavy drinking, but also infidelity and domestic violence. 2 years later, they reconciled and married again, and get divorced again. After a certain Frau Ruth Doffner makes a complaint to the local police, Honka finds himself arrested and put on trial for attempted rape. Because the court deemed his being very drunk as mitigating circumstances, he is only convicted of assault. In the pubs of St. Pauli, however, such offences are common and the locals accept him as before. The murder trial begins in November 1976. During the trial, Honka changes his story, even though he had made a detailed confession 12 days after the bodies were discovered. He will only admit to having dismembered the corpses. The only thing he didn't really think over is, why would he have hidden the corpses of his victims in his own apartment, if he hadn't killed them. Even his lawyers are convinced that Honka murdered the women. Honka has celebrity lawyer Rolf Bosse defending him. He wants to have his client declared insane. He explains to the court that Honka was extremely drunk during the crimes. He says that Honka felt badly offended and provoked by the victims, so that the murder allegation ultimately only comes into play in one case, that of Gertraud Breuer. Bosse emphasizes the desolate life of Honka, who was himself destroyed, and pleads for him to be confined in a psychiatric hospital. The judgment of December 1976 speaks of the defendant's mental abnormality. Honka served his sentence at the Ochsenzoll Clinic in Hamburg. After 15 years he was allowed periodic day outings, then eventually released on probation. In 1996 he was officially released. Fritz Honka moved into a retirement home in Scharbeutz on the Baltic Sea, under the pseudonym Peter Jensen. The authorities decided to give him lifelong anonymity, but back in society he became increasingly confused and suffered a persecution complex, until it was decided he should return to the psychiatric facility. Fritz Honka died on October the 19th, 1998, at the age of 63, from the effects of heart failure and asthma, presumably as a result of his excessive use of alcohol and smoking, both before and during his confinement. The Honka case continues to preoccupy people long after his death. To this day, many can't help but wonder why his crimes went undetected for so long. Many say that the stench of decomposing bodies is unmistakable. Why didn't the caretaker and police, who were notified of it, make a thorough investigation? The case is notorious enough in Germany to still cause goosebumps, even to this day. The House of Horrors on Zeichstrasse is still standing. The innocent facade gives no hint of its gruesome history. Does the present tenant who occupies Honka's old apartment ever wake up in the night to a ghostly waft of those exotic spices?
Weil wir zwei uns verstehen. Du bist mein Gedanke.
Well, my dear friends, I hope you enjoyed that presentation. What a strange character Fritz was. I wonder what the other tenants thought after they found out there was rotting bodies in their house. Doesn't bear thinking about, does it? Oh my goodness. Obviously some of them had the suspicion that something foul was afoot, and that's why they rang the police and complained, but no one seemed to take any notice. I guess he looked so harmless. How many other serial killers are living anonymous amongst us? They do crop up from time to time, don't they? Strange case, this one. It's possibly one you haven't heard of. Maybe I'll look to doing some more German cases and European cases, because they're not the ones that do the usual rounds. I try to keep it interesting and give a bit of a smorgasbord so that there's different subjects. Like Rebecca, some people enjoy that. Some people like these vintage crimes. Try to keep a bit of variety. Yeah, what was he doing with the torsos? Why did he was careful to scatter the rest of the body parts around the city, but he kept the torsos? Was it because he was small of stature and that the torsos were too heavy for him to carry and too conspicuous? Maybe that was the reason. He's obviously kept the part of the body that's going to stink the most. And maybe the thought of chopping that up left even him queasy. Who knows what was going through his mind. And that poor sex doll, it looked like it had been through the wars. My goodness. How could he eat? Maybe he ate out at restaurants and got takeaways and ate them outside, because how could you eat with that stink? Oh, my goodness. My goodness. Well, I've never been to Hamburg. I've never been to the Reeperbahn, to St. Pauli. Whenever I do a video about a particular subject, then I get quite interested in it. I start looking at different things. You can hear the police going by there. It sounds like the Reeperbahn, doesn't it? Yeah, so I get interested in it and I start looking at different photos and videos. And I watched a very interesting series. It's a German series, and it was filmed on the Reeperbahn, and the producer of it lived just across the road from where the filming took place. And where it took place is one of those discount supermarkets. I think it's called the Penny Markt. You have that sort of thing like the pound store in England. I don't know what you call them in America. I'm sure you know what I mean, though. It's where everything is really cheap. Sometimes you can get good stuff, for a fraction of the price, and they're sort of undercutting the supermarkets if that's possible. But the characters that get in this one, it's in 4 parts, this series, and they just film all these sort of homeless people who have basically set up camp around this supermarket. They've got security on and everything, because there's some strange characters that get in, fists flying and everything, because they're selling alcohol. And of course this attracts that crowd of the alcoholic homeless people who have set up camp, and they keep getting banned from the store, and they'll be in an hour again later trying their luck and stealing bottles. But a very interesting series, and it became a huge hit in Germany, I found out. And some of the characters have become beloved. Some of these, they've all got their story to tell, these homeless people. Very interesting. I wouldn't mind doing a series myself in the red light district here. I'm going to have to look into that. Then I could sort of translate it into English for my viewers on YouTube. It could be interesting. And so now let's have a look at some photos from the 70s of St. Pauli, the Reeperbahn, when Fritz Honka was active, shall we say. These photos also have their own story to tell. You might find them interesting. Check this out. So the first picture here It's this guy sort of hanging on to the lamppost for support. It reminds me of those sort of 1950s table lamps, with the drunk guy, hanging around the lamppost. He looks quite well dressed, doesn't he? Maybe he was out on a party the night before and lost his friends along the way. And now he has to face the early morning commuters who are looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. I bet he's got a rotten head. And the next picture, here we have the Reeperbahn in full swing. This here says erotic in the Folterkammer, which means like eroticism in the torture chamber. I don't know what that's all about. Orgies and perverted love play. Okay. What do we got? Non-stop sex show, Las Vegas. They do love the American terms. That sort of brings the people in. This is what you call a pawn shop, not as in pornography, as in you take in stuff. Pawn shop in the old English word, P-A-W-N. Take in stuff that you have and treasure, which has some value, and they will give money out on it. A hock shop too, I think they call it in Australia, hock shop. I think everyone's used them at one time, but they don't really have many anymore. It used to be quite common in the old days. If you were running short of money at the end of the month, you would go in and put your watch in or something to get some extra money. Next picture. See, they love that. San Francisco, non-stop sex show. The Bild, that's a very famous. It's still going. It's a newspaper in Germany. What are they selling here? Potatoes. Potato chips. Okay, it's a fish and chip shop. And this here had been a Damenfrisur, which means a woman's hairdresser at one stage, and it is now turned into a cheap, seedy hotel. Die Glocke from St. Pauli. And here we have another hotel on the Reeperbahn, and the room prices here. A double room is 25 Denmark. A single room is 16 Denmark, and with the double room you get a bath, a kitchen, a toilet, and a telephone. Not bad. Not bad at all. What else have we got along? What sort of shops? I'm always interested to see what sort of shops they have. There's a little cafe there. Not that interesting. Next picture. This one here I decided to also show because it shows the decline of... Now this is, by the way, a general store. Lebensmittelgeschäfte. This would have been like your old general store that sold basically everything for the people living in the neighborhood. And of course in the 70s the supermarkets started taking over, and here we see the decline of these stores. And Odette, she even remembers as a kid the general store in the village here, which eventually was put out of business by the supermarket that moved in to the neighborhood. It's a bit of a shame. I guess they call it progress. That's the way it is. This one here is really probably the better end of St. Pauli. It has nothing to do with the red light district. I just really like it because of the beautiful architecture on this shop. It's a hardware shop, metalware, hardware. Wonderful. I guess that's all gone now. Probably been pulled down. There's a reason I got this. It's so interesting. It's obviously a flea market in St. Pauli. And is this where Fritz secured his plastic love? Ah, my dear, the look on this guy's face, like, you dare say something. There's another one here. The Elbschloss beer. The Elbschloss Keller is one I showed you, wasn't it? It's open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, although I wonder how it fared during the coronavirus. It must have been quite hard for a lot of these shop owners anyway, really, but yeah, particularly here where it relies on the nightlife, and all this has been very badly affected by the coronavirus. Well, my dear friends, I'm going to love you and leave you. I've prattled on enough, but I do hope you found it interesting. I'd love to hear your comments on this. I'm always interested to hear your comments. Anyway, take care. God bless. Bye-bye.